Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. Sorry for the long gap. It's been half term, so I haven't been able to record these, but I've been collecting clips and I'll try and put them in time order, but apologies if there's any out of time order. It's going to be quite a long one. It covers 4 different subjects. The killing of 2 Israeli ambassadors, the war in Gaza, the Haiti gangs, and Donald Trump's assertion of genocide against Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa. So you'll hear all those bits, and I'm just documenting them because, like I say, I always try to take labels off of this. Because if you have labels, then, one side can say, well, this, that, and, I'm looking at it from like a God perspective of humanity. Because my assertion is always that the system that we're living in is not working and is failing. And this is an example of it. The way we're treating each other, that's what I want to show. Humanity to humanity. It doesn't matter about which side you're on. It doesn't matter all that. It matters what we have, one existence, and this is what we're doing to each other in these different aspects. So in the case of the Donald Trump and genocide in South Africa of a few hundred farmers, that's just a crime like any other crime. Like, you have a clip where it says there's 30,000 crimes. You could pick bits of Western in America or UK where there's crimes against, in the same number of 1,000 or less, or a few hundred against a certain people or type, and then equate that into genocide. But what's interesting I found about this, and I'm sure this is all down to Elon Musk's being refused Starlink in South Africa and his connection to Donald Trump, because he's been posting about genocide in South Africa, is that when Benjamin Netanyahu was sitting with Donald Trump, he didn't treat him in the same respect. He didn't pull out clips of printed out newspaper clippings and go death, 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 or tell, whereas there's a lot of lawyers, a lot of humanitarians that are talking around the subject of genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza. We all see daily what's going on. 54,000 people have been killed, and maybe a lot of them are, or some of them are Hamas or affiliates, or etc. But we know there's a large majority of non-combatants which are protected under international law that are being caught up in this. But he was not. And the case for a few hundred or 1,000, I think it's a few hundred, it's 300 deaths of last year of white farmers, equates to nothing compared to 3,000 were killed in the last month in Gaza. So it just shows you the hypocrisy. These people that try to be bastions of truth and try and show themselves as I'm the greatest and all this kind of stuff. See how they treat different people, their friends and their so-called enemies, or the people that they don't want to be so close with, or the people they're relying on. This is why our system doesn't work. Our system of democracy, our government, is failing us. That our system of money, our system of dividing each other up, because it allows these types of things to happen. And they're becoming more now, where the people who are leaders are just disregarding our intrinsic truth that we're all human beings, we're all one species, we're all together in this one existence that we all have. But yeah, to me it was interesting how he treated South Africa as opposed to Israel, or even Russia, for that example. He's being very friendly or protective of Vladimir Putin, who a lot of Western leaders would consider as someone, as a tyrant. And you've got to question, if that's the leader of the free world and the most powerful nation, isn't that very dangerous? And then align themselves with people who go on social media talking about genocide when there's no actual definition been met of that, or could be met of that. Then there's the Haiti gangs. You see how gangs have taken over in Haiti, and irrespective of all of this, that the fact that in this time and day, how many things are happening in Ukraine as well, and Russia, how many people are dying needlessly because of our way of looking at each other as not being brothers and sisters of each other, wanting to, like cavemen of the past, control, like those imperial men of the past, colonists who wanted to claim and possess through greed and create money systems that are unequal and all that kind of stuff, that we're all feeling the legacy of those types of people that we all denounce now, but we're living in their world still. We haven't woken up to the fact that we're all human beings and we can make any way. But just to see the plight that's happening in Haiti, that's not being represented very much because of obviously what's happening in Gaza is so much more extreme. And I guess you could say that the same with Ukraine, because I didn't realise how many people are being killed in that war. It seems, because the way they report it, you don't really see very much. You see, like they say 10 people have died, you feel like, well, that's nothing compared to Gaza. But they were saying like hundreds of thousands of soldiers and whatnot have been killed. This is human lives nevertheless. And they're all dying for some, one person or a few persons' views of, and what is it all to do with again? Power, greed, and control. The same as most wars. There's very little valour in them. Then obviously you've got Gaza. I mean, we can all see what's going on there. It's getting worse and worse now. Words like genocide and ethnic cleansing are being talked of. Aid is being argued between the UN and this new humanitarian group. I mean, it just shows the failings of humanity. We are failing each other. This system doesn't protect us. The most vulnerable in these Western nations stand up in their suits, go to their fancy dinners, whether it's in the UK or US or France or Canada or wherever, denouncing such things. Oh, don't do this, like Father Ted with his sign of, don't watch this or whatever it was. And, it's like piecemeal. It's nothing. It's just, I want to look like I was doing something. So in history, I can say that, well, yeah, I stood against that. What did you fucking do? You did nothing. You stood up in your fancy Armani suits after having luxury meals in your luxury mansions, like some scene out of 1984, and just said a few words or signed a paper, and that's all that was done. But yet, still, countless deaths are taking place. And that's why our system doesn't work, because there is no way to stop these kinds of things, because we're not sensible enough. Because the only way we would stop it is if another country, like America, removed aid or started helping out the Palestinians like they did during Vietnam, where, and all those types of things, a proxy war and etc., which is not going to happen because they're too friendly. But so that's the problem when we're not looking at the intrinsics that we're human beings, the way we treat each other. And the killing of the 2 Israeli ambassadors, showing how, I worried about this in the last few Pursuits of Truth, that when the power of social media, I mean, only a few people listen to me, but sometimes it does worry me that, I even thought about that, like when you release something on YouTube, that someone can watch it, and if their mind is a certain way set, they see these things as justification for going and do something stupid, which doesn't help anyone. No, I do not want deaths. I do not want people killing each other for whatever reason, and it doesn't help nothing. It didn't help. Those 2 people died needlessly. Those 2 Israeli ambassadors, one of which was very geared towards humanitarian efforts in Gaza. That doesn't... Indiscriminate killing of people doesn't help. That's why we have armies. But still, even those, they're dying for other people's ideals, that they just are following orders. How stupid we are this way at the world we live in. But it just made me very worried that, I get it, like with Benjamin Netanyahu making the claim of that UK and Canada and France were creating an anti-Semitic wave by, in his words, supporting Hamas by condemning Israel's actions. and trying to equate the two. But there'll always be those people who are racist or who are against, who are violent, or think that violent means somehow wins you. Well, unfortunately, in the world wars, that is borne out, but it took a long, long time of that to finish wars. But it is worrying sometimes when you criticise something and then people can pick up on it and say, oh, you're this or you're that, or can use that as a fuel, because it becomes an echo chamber. And then they think, these individuals, like the gunman who needlessly killed these two this young couple who now don't have a life, much like the many Gazans who don't have a life either. It's all the same. See, that's what I mean. It doesn't matter about the tags. Take the tags away. They're human beings that are dying here on our watch. And we're all watching it because in the past, in like the Second World War, you had Pathé or you had radio, the BBC News or whatever, but it was not like this. We're seeing things real time, even though a bit uncensored, but we're all watching how we are as humanity, treating each other while all going to church and mosques or watching films about human rights and championing them. And it's just such a disappointment. And like I always say, I wonder if there is a God, a creator, looking down on us, what he must think of how, he's given us everything. And yet we've come to this situation where we're just fighting each other over the stuff that he gave us. I mean, I don't know why we don't wake up from this. Anyway, here's the clips. Take care, take it easy, God bless and peace.
Hello, good evening. It started innocuously enough with a good-natured discussion about golf, but Donald Trump then mounted an astonishing ambush on South Africa's president in the White House tonight. During a live news conference, Mr. Trump dimmed the lights and played a video to Cyril Ramaphosa, purportedly showing evidence of a genocide of white people in South Africa. Clearly surprised, Mr. Ramaphosa rejected the allegations, insisting there was no genocide in his country. Sky's Ashish Joshi reports now from Washington on their extraordinary encounter.
Forward! March!
A White House welcome for a president looking for friendship. Trailed as talks for new trade agreements and a chance to reset relations between the United States and South Africa.
Thank you very much for being here.
Cyril Ramaphosa wanted to talk business.
Thank you very much.
And with golfing royalty Ernie Els and Retief Goosen among the South African delegation appealing to Trump's favourite pastime. It started off friendly enough, but the situation quickly derailed.
What will it take for you to be convinced that there's no white genocide in South Africa?
Well, I can answer that. It will take President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans.
Another ambush of a visiting dignitary.
Turn the lights down.
This film, a montage of rallies held by the Communist Opposition Party, chanting for the deaths of white farmers. It made for uncomfortable viewing, prompting disbelief among the South African delegation.
Burial sites, over 1,000 of white farmers.
The White House says this is proof of persecution, but there are questions over the veracity and motivation of the Trump administration in its pursuit of its discredited claims.
Have they told you where that is, Mr. President? No, I'd like to know where that is.
South Africa accepts that law and order is a continuing challenge, but totally rejects the allegation that white people are disproportionately targeted by crime.
Death, death, death. They're saying that kill the white farmer and take their land.
Cyril Ramaphosa tried as hard as he could to stay diplomatic.
Let me clarify that, because what you saw, the speeches that were being made, One, that is not government policy.
Elon Musk looked on silently. He's been amplifying the claims of genocide on his social media platform. But he didn't need to say anything here. The president's attack on South Africa was complete. Cyril Ramaphosa came here knowing that he'd be in for a really hard time trying to convince Donald Trump that his claims of a genocide in South Africa was simply not true. But the South African president could not have expected a Zelensky-style ambush here in the Oval Office of the White House.
Welcome to the United States of America.
The Afrikaner families who sought refuge in America earlier this year have had their claims fast-tracked, whilst other refugees fleeing war have been denied entry. Their cause has now blown up on a world stage that even they would have not thought possible. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in Washington.
Well, let's return now to America and those extraordinary scenes in the White House last night during the visit of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Donald Trump showed the South African president a video which he said showed evidence of a genocide of white farmers. Donald Trump said the footage showed the graves of more than 1,000 white farmers. Well, on the Sky News Trump 100 podcast, our US correspondents Mark Stone and Martha Kellner debunked claims by the far right that thousands of white farmers are being killed in South Africa.
Let's do a bit of our own debunking because it is quite important. The videos that were played, they are historic, they're old. What Julius Malema was saying was from 2018. It's remarks that actually put him in court. He was ordered to stop making those remarks as a consequence of the court case. Look at the figures as well. There were a total number of farm murders, 2,300 since 1990, each one of them tragic, each one of them awful, but it does not represent a genocide. Most of those murders were indeed white people, not black people, but it doesn't, as I say, it doesn't represent anything like what Trump is claiming. These figures, incidentally, are from a commercial farmers union made up mostly of Afrikaners. So those are the facts. They do not represent what Trump was claiming.
Well, a reminder, you can scan the QR code on your screen to get the latest episode of the Trump 100 podcast, always worth a listen. Well, joining me now is Ibrahim Rasool, a former South African ambassador to the US. He was expelled from the US and declared persona non grata by the Trump administration. Ibrahim, good to talk to you. What was going through your mind when you watched those images of that meeting last night?
I think it was a sense of deja vu. In a sense, the kind of pushback I received when I was ambassador there from the kind of MAGA crowd, but also just the kind of Zelensky encounter in the White House. However, what was different here was that we had South Africa presenting a fairly united front. I was very happy with that, both diverse and dignified. I think South Africa standing firm on its values, particularly the case against Israel in the International Court of Justice, and South Africa hopefully advancing its interests. But I think it was very difficult to do a rebuttal with President Trump, particularly when he was palpably wrong and false in his accusations against South Africa, and not allowing the kind of rebuttals to really take place of a genocide and land confiscation. So it was unfortunate that South Africa could not do a full rebuttal, but I think, as your insert said, the facts are with South Africa in this case. And I want to say that it's in fact tapering down the kind of farm murders as well, because in the last 10 years, there's been 630 farm murders, and that includes black farm workers, including 2 women who were shot in the last year and fed to the pigs. About a 6-year-old boy run over for picking up an orange. An alleged drunk farm worker being dragged for 70 meters until he died. And so I think it's a good thing that we didn't trade those kind of horror stories, because they are horrible on both sides. But I do think that those were the kind of things that the South African delegation could have replied with had they simply had the chance.
How do you think generally Cyril Ramaphosa handled him? I mean, he made a joke about wishing he could have brought a plane along for President Trump, and President Trump said he would have accepted it if he had. I mean, he sort of tried to laugh it off. Do you think that's the best policy with Trump?
Look, I think that if you've done the serious work in the days running up to that by negotiating trade, negotiating investments, and then I think it's probably a calculated guess to take a little bit of the sideshow, the bizarre show that I think played out in the White House, because sometimes as South Africans, we're probably just very happy that we spoke to each other, that we're busy negotiating, that the relationship, although punctuated by bizarre episodes, that the relationship is on track again, and that maybe we can salvage the jobs and the economy in South Africa through our continued good relations on trade and investment with the USA.
What do you think Cyril Ramaphosa got out of it?
I'm hoping that he got out of it not just a sense that he was not given the chance to put South Africa's case on the burning issues like genocide and land appropriation, because the facts are with him, but that he may have salvaged by allowing Donald Trump to vent on the kind of issues that he vented on, so that the main issues, such as the trade, the investment, and even the little sense that Starlink of Elon Musk could be accommodated, if that's the bigger picture, then maybe there's a sense that on the smaller issues, let's hope that the facts run with us and that we didn't need to escalate the issue into even something more unseemly than what we saw in the White House yesterday.
Ibrahim Rasool, former South African ambassador to the US. Good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Story of the evening so far, and there is shock across America tonight after a young couple who worked at the Israeli embassy in Washington were shot dead as they left an event at a Jewish museum. A suspect was filmed shouting "Free Palestine" as he was arrested by police. Sky News has uncovered a social media post believed to be from the suspect in which he criticized Israel's actions in Gaza. Israel has blamed toxic anti-Semitism for the killing and says it's bolstering security at its buildings around the world. The mayor of the District of Columbia, Muriel Bowser, is due to hold a news conference shortly, and of course we'll bring that to you here on Sky News. But let's go to our US correspondent Mark Stone, who is in Washington for us. And Mark, an utterly shocking incident this, and we're going to hear from the mayor of Washington shortly, and also the suspect could be in court later today.
Yes, we'll hear from the mayor a little bit later on today. She gave her first news conference late last night, around 11:30, alongside the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who we spoke to again today. We'll hear from her in a moment, and also the Israeli ambassador, who will be back here in about a half an hour's time to give an updated statement from his perspective. If I step out of the way, you can see the Capital Jewish Museum, where just over 12 hours ago this shooting unfolded. A huge number of media have gathered here, but also locals and those who from the Jewish community around Washington, D.C. and beyond have gathered to mark their respects for what has happened, what has unfolded. That we've seen prayers this morning taking place. One prayer which the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, participated in before coming to talk to us, to give us her sense of the situation. I have to say, she looked deeply, deeply shocked. As I say, she was here last night pretty quickly. Her office is not far from here. She was at the scene very quickly, then part of that news conference last night, and gave a little update to me earlier on today.
Has the threat level been increased at Israeli missions around the country?
Yes, I can tell you that, yes. The question was, has the threat level been increased? I can tell you security has been increased here as of last night. Our U.S. Marshals are working hand in hand to make sure the embassy is safe, our ambassador is safe. And again, please know, everything we know now, he acted alone. From everything we know now, this is an ongoing investigation. But you know, whether you're Jewish or not, be vigilant. You know, this is the last thing these two young people, they were at a religious event right around the corner from where we're standing, a religious event with friends and with coworkers. They walked outside to go home and were gunned down. That cannot happen in our community. And this is the day where we all need to come together, no matter what religion we are. And you know, the Muslim religion actually reached out to our rabbis and offered condolences and sent a beautiful message that they just showed me. And that's what should be happening in our world.
No, there is a particular tragedy to all of this because details are emerging of the young couple themselves. Yaron Lachinsky was 30 years old, a research assistant in the political department of the Israeli embassy here in Washington, D.C. And his partner, Sarah Milgrim, 26 years old. She was American. She organized trips to Israel from the embassy. They were due to be engaged. The Israeli ambassador last night revealed that Mr. Lachinsky had bought a ring, and they were due to travel to Jerusalem next week to mark, to carry out, he was due to carry out that engagement next week in Jerusalem. So a deeply, deeply tragic personal story there. We have had a statement from an organization called Tech to Peace, which is a organization that works to deepen dialogue in conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. Now, that organization is one that Sarah Milgrim had worked for. The statement says Sarah was a devoted and active volunteer in our Tech to Peace community. She participated in seminars, supported our team with grace and commitment, and remained a meaningful presence over the years. Her energy, thoughtfulness, and unwavering belief in dialogue, peace, and equality inspired everyone who had the privilege to work with her. And it goes on to say Sarah was a deeply curious person, always seeking to learn and connect. She brought people together with empathy and purpose, and her dedication to building a better future was evident in everything she did. Her voice and spirit will be profoundly missed. So a very personal statement there from one organization that was connected with one of the two victims. We have also had a statement from the museum in the last hour or so. They say that this is a horrific act of anti-Semitic violence. A gunman attacked our beloved community. The tragedy is devastating. As you heard from Pam Bondi there, she believes, as Attorney General, she can't comment on the case itself, on the gunman himself. It's a live investigation, but she says the full force of American justice will be thrown at this man. We will follow the facts, she said. She also confirmed that she'd spoken last night to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, and that she had spoken repeatedly to the US President Donald Trump, who I imagine we will hear from at some point later today. We'll certainly hear from his press secretary as well, as this city comes to terms with a really shocking incident overnight.
The Israeli government talking about wild incitement, including by European political leaders.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this was always going to become, as I described, a deeply personal and poignant tragedy for the two individuals concerned, but happening at this time, at a time of such tension on a conflict which these two people were working on. Indeed, we heard just there in that statement how Sarah had been working to try and improve dialogue on such a difficult issue. Of course, it is deeply political as well, and we will, I imagine, get much more of those sorts of statements from different leaders as people try to try and rationalize in their own minds how something like this could happen. But from the police's point of view, from the FBI's point of view, and the judicial authorities, their focus is to follow their nose and work out why this man did this and whether or not he was acting alone. But as the Attorney General said there, Mark, her belief is that he was acting alone. Of course, the concern all along is that it could encourage others who might share his views to do something similar. So vigilance was her message today. Vigilance, yes, to the Jewish community, of course, but to all communities as well here in Washington and around the US.
Okay, Mark, thanks very much. And on the left of your screen there is apparently a rabbi speaking outside the Jewish museum. Let's just have a listen to what he is saying.
Think of the life that they were to have. Deep down, the question is not, are you right or are you wrong? Is the side you stand on right or wrong? It's, are you willing to make this world what it ought to be?
And we're also expecting the Israeli ambassador to the US to deliver some remarks there in the coming hour or two. So we will return for that. Let's go to Gaza now, and the UN says aid groups have collected supplies carried by 90 trucks out of a total of 200 which have entered the enclave since Israel began allowing limited aid in. Israel gave permission for dozens of aid trucks to enter Gaza earlier this week in the face of international pressure after blocking all food, medicine and fuel for almost 3 months. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle has this report.
Some aid is now starting to get into Gaza and to the millions who need it. Only a little and not yet enough, but it is something. The United Nations said that 90 truckloads of aid has now been processed, including flour, sugar and food. Mina is 9 years old. The last time she had any bread, she says, was almost 2 months ago.
The border is closed and flour is unbelievably expensive. 2,000 to 3,000 shekels. We don't have that kind of money. No one can work anymore, so we can't eat.
As soon as food is available, there is a panicked scramble to get to the front and get some before it runs out. Fail, and the whole family might go without anything at all. The meal today was a bowl of plain rice.
Unbelievable prices. I'm one of the many here who can't afford anything. Not a tomato, not a cucumber, chili pepper. I just can't buy it. The prices in the market are just unbelievable. I've been at this soup kitchen since 8 a.m. waiting for a plate of rice or some cooked beans. My children sometimes go to bed without dinner. Sometimes they don't have breakfast. They wait for me to come back with something from the soup kitchen for lunch. If I couldn't get anything, then they won't have lunch.
These bags of flour have just arrived in Gaza. They'll be used to make thousands of loaves of pita bread. It is the first time this bakery's been working in months. The bread will immediately go to those most in need.
What we brought is definitely not enough, but we hope that the borders will remain open and we'll be able to bring more aid into Gaza. 2.2 million people of Gaza, almost everyone depends on humanitarian aid.
Ceasefire talks in Qatar have completely broken down. Benjamin Netanyahu is now demanding the relocation of Gazans to another country as one of his conditions to end the war. The aid blockade might be over. Gaza is now getting some food to eat. But peace, that remains a very distant hope. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News in Jerusalem.
Well, Donald Trump described this man as a government official. He is Julius Malema, an opposition leader and considered by many to be a fringe figure. His party has 6% of seats in parliament. So they are not, as Trump claimed, officials and are not considered a mainstream party. Ramaphosa repeatedly stressed that EFF is a small minority. Trump also held up articles saying they show white farmers being targeted, their burial sites, and that some were even burnt. That first article in the previous clip showed body bags, which were featured on a February 2025 YouTube video of Red Cross workers in the Democratic Republic of Congo, nothing to do with South Africa. Another video played by the US president showed lines of white crosses alongside a road, claiming it is a burial site for white farmers, but there is no indication that this is true. The white crosses are believed to be a memorial for farmers, black and white, who were murdered. Satellite imagery from 2023 shows the crosses are no longer there. White crosses have been used as a symbol of commemoration for the murder of farmers in South Africa for years, like in the Whitcreas Monument. Our Africa correspondent, Yusra El-Bagir, has been speaking to farmers and has this report.
It's a quiet, sunny morning in South Africa, after an ambush of its president in America. But at a glance, you'd think there was nothing going on. It's strange to think that idyllic, small, white-owned South African farms like this one are ground zero for such an explosive meeting thousands of miles away in the Oval Office. But what happens here and how it's represented is fueling President Trump's claims of a white genocide. Interesting to know. When we last spoke to Vani, he was happy white farmers were being offered protection by the US.
We had a lot of break-ins.
After the meeting at the Oval Office, he's elated. What did you think of the White House meeting?
Americans will call it a whipping. I will say immediately, we are not in genocide at this stage. We are suffering from crime, and they are targeting the white people, but because they're a little bit more affluent than other people.
Few days.
But a much more deliberate case of persecution is being alleged by President Trump.
Death, 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 horrible death.
Who presented discredited sources as evidence of a white genocide in South Africa. A case refuted by facts and one simple statement from its president.
There is just no genocide in South Africa.
But there are issues Afrikaners say they need addressed.
Instead of going into a genocide or not genocide fight, just accept farm murders is a serious issue, and there are tangible steps that we can take. And those steps we have put in our proposal that we are going to discuss with the ANC, and I think that is the way to go.
Ultimately, the statistics don't support a case of mass killing.
If you look at the official statistics from the police, they already show that a year we have murders that are over 30,000. But when you're thinking about the farming community as a part of that, it's a small share, around 0.1%.
Once again, South Africa's bitter racial politics is being laid bare for the world to see. 30 years after apartheid ended, and only 5 months after Trump was inaugurated. Yusra El-Bagir, Sky News, South Africa.
Well, we put our findings about the images used by Donald Trump to the White House, and a spokesperson disputed what they called the characterization of the president's evidence regarding the persecution of Afrikaners as inaccurate. Now, this week, we've been bringing you a series of special reports from Haiti, a Caribbean nation teetering on the brink as its capital is terrorized by gang violence. Tonight, we go inside a hospital in Port-au-Prince where malnutrition and cholera are rife and children are most affected. Well, the UN says violence between the warring gangs has displaced more than 1 million people. The fighting is blamed for the deaths of at least 5,600 people just last year. Almost 6 million Haitians are going hungry and need food assistance, unsure where their next meal will come from. Well, Port-au-Prince has also lost most of its medical facilities, either closed or unable to function. Our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, went to the only working hospital left in an area called Cité Soleil, which means Sun City. And a warning, his report contains pictures of malnourished children, which you may find distressing.
It's known as the birthplace of the gangs of Port-au-Prince. This section of town has been violent and dangerous for decades. It's called Cité Soleil, Sun City. Armed gang members check us out, but we're with a known driver. We're allowed to pass. Civil society doesn't function here. The gangs control everything and attack anything, even hospitals. The Fontaine Hospital, built in the slums of Cité Soleil, is the only medical facility still functioning. Without it, the people here would have no access to doctors or medicine. Founded 32 years ago by Jose Ulis, it's a charity. In the cholera ward, he told me the increasing gang violence across Port-au-Prince and the chaos it's causing means people are herding into displacement camps. Cholera outbreaks are getting worse. For these cholera patients, their only hope of survival is here.
Cholera is always present, but there's a time when it's more. Lately, because of all the people in the displacement camps, there is a great deal of promiscuity and rape, and we have an increase in cases.
In the clinic, they give food to parents to feed their babies. These children are all malnourished. The giveaway sign, as always, their distended tummies. Poverty and insecurity combine to cause this. Like cholera, malnutrition is getting worse. But these little children are all badly malnourished. We've also seen cholera in the hospital. What the doctors say is they are absolutely all linked to the gang violence here in Port-au-Prince. Basically, the malnutrition is because the parents can't go to work, they can't earn money, it's too dangerous outside, they can't afford to buy food, and the kids end up in places like this. The cholera, again, it's here all the time, but when the insecurity is high and people are living close together, it spreads everywhere. The sexual violence is on the increase. There's many, many problems, but they all have one common denominator, and that's the crime gangs. The medics and hospital workers risk their lives every day crossing the gang territories to care for their patients, and they are some of the most incredibly vulnerable. If you weren't here, how bad would it be for the community?
Just imagine. Just imagine. There isn't any place where they can go. Everyone comes here. Normally, the poorest people in the country come here.
Attacks on hospitals and staff working in the toughest areas of Port-au-Prince have become common. Threats to Médecins Sans Frontières staff has forced them to suspend work at 2 facilities. In crowded displacement camps, mobile teams do their best to help tens of thousands who are effectively living rough. It means that what is left of the government-run health service, like Le Pay Hospital, are simply overwhelmed by demand.
Well, this is a fully functioning hospital, but it is absolutely stretched to capacity, mainly because 70% of medical facilities in Port-au-Prince have been closed down because of the gangs. They've been attacked, they've been burned, and sometimes the staff in these facilities have been threatened, so they've had to move on. So it means we're now in the only functioning major hospital in the capital of the country.
This epidemic of gang violence that's crushing the light out of Port-au-Prince is a virus that's spreading through society. A virus that seems to have no cure. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Port-au-Prince.
It's 6 o'clock, I'm Jonathan Samuels. This is the News Hour, the top stories. The race against time to get aid to the people of Gaza as the Israeli offensive intensifies. We hear from a hospital in Gaza as the UN warns that the aid authorised by Israel to enter the Strip is too little, too late.
All the aid authorised until now amounts to a teaspoon of aid when a flood of assistance is required.
A federal judge blocks the Trump administration from banning the enrolment of foreign students at Harvard University. Donald Trump threatens a tariff of 50% on the European Union, saying trade talks with Brussels are going nowhere. And we're live in North London for Tottenham's Trophy Parade, where they're showing off their new European silverware. Hello, a very good evening, and we start tonight with the growing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Limited aid deliveries resumed this week, but the United Nations has warned that it's too little, too late. Speaking this afternoon, the UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, said the amount of aid being allowed into Gaza by Israel is nowhere near enough. Hospitals in Gaza are struggling to cope with new mothers unable to feed themselves or their babies. And a warning, this report from our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle contains images of malnourished babies and children, which you may well find distressing.
The Kamal Adwan hospital in northern Gaza is barely standing. Inside, the wards are covered in the debris of airstrikes. It was one of the largest hospitals in northern Gaza. It is now in ruins. The streets and buildings nearby have been totally obliterated. The Israeli offensive, increasing in its intensity every day, has forced 4 major hospitals in Gaza to stop work over the past week, worsening an already desperate medical crisis. The Rantisi Hospital was a small clinic specialising in children's care, but now has to take patients from right across Gaza. They are overwhelmed.
Today we receive between 300 and 500 cases daily, with approximately 10% requiring admission. This volume of inpatient cases far exceeds the capacity of Rantisi Hospital, as the facility is not equipped to accommodate such large numbers.
The blockade has also created a massive shortage in baby formula. New mothers are struggling to breastfeed, unable to produce milk through a lack of food themselves, and then their babies don't get the vital nutrients they need. It is a lethal spiral. This is what Aya looked like shortly after she was born. She is now 3 months old and dangerously thin. Her skin stretches over her cheekbones and eye sockets, across her gaunt, pale face. Her nappy is too big for her emaciated little body.
My daughter was born at a normal weight, 3.5 kilograms, but as the war went on, she kept losing weight. My breast milk wasn't good enough. It gave her diarrhea. Formula, same thing. Her condition is serious. I don't want to lose her, because I lost my husband, and she's all I have left of him. I don't want to lose her. I just really want her to get treated. That's it.
The UN Secretary-General said today that no aid has reached the north of Gaza yet, and he has accused Israel of preventing essential items from getting in.
Strict quotas are being imposed on the goods we distribute, along with unnecessary delay procedures. Other essentials, including fuel, shelter, cooking gas, and water purification supplies, are prohibited.
Tens of thousands are now being driven to the south of Gaza as the north becomes too dangerous. It has become a city of canvas, what remains of their lives and belongings, now in small tents pitched on stony ground.
We couldn't take all our belongings because of the Israeli army's presence, the constant airstrikes, the leaflets being dropped, and the evacuation orders. The intensity of the bombardment forced us to flee. We couldn't even think about taking our food stores, let alone our mattresses.
This, according to government ministers, is Israel's strategy to push the population into a small section of Gaza and then expect them to leave when life becomes unlivable. Benjamin Netanyahu now says that the war won't end until that is achieved. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Well, earlier I spoke to our security and defence analyst, Michael Clark, who explained the issues surrounding aid distribution in Gaza.
The UN is saying that 500,000 people, 500,000,
are facing immediate starvation. They're at the point of starvation, that's what the UN says. That's their estimate. And yesterday, the 107 trucks went in, according to the Israelis. Well, that's about less than a fifth of the daily requirement. It's 500 to 600 trucks a day are required for basic humanitarian and medical needs. So, there were about a fifth of it. But getting trucks over the border is only one thing. Distributing the aid is the other problem. There are lots of reports yesterday of some aid trucks being attacked by desperate people and chaos ensuing. Hamas police turned up, took control of the aid. And of course, the Israelis will say, well, that's Hamas stealing the aid. What Hamas will say is this is us just trying to stop people killing themselves, trying to get hold of the aid. Probably both are partly true. So, sending trucks in is one thing, but the distribution process inside Gaza is broken down because the UN doesn't have anything to distribute. And the Israelis are saying we're not authorizing the UN to distribute any aid. Israel is saying that we've set up this new Gaza humanitarian organization, the GHO, to distribute aid. And that organization is made up of private contractors working for the Israeli government. They say that there are 4 distribution centers, one toward the north, but 3 of them in the south. And so they're pulling people southwards to get hold of the aid. And this, of course, is a reversal of normal humanitarian principles. Normally, food goes to the starving. In this case, the starving have got to go to the food. And what the UN says is that this is the weaponization of aid. We won't be part of it because this makes us complicit in what could well be regarded as ethnic cleansing, which is a war crime. And so there's a standoff between the UN organization, the Israeli government, and in the middle are the people of Gaza who, with 107 trucks yesterday, it's still not clear that aid has been distributed. And as we heard there from Ali's report, there's no evidence of any aid at all getting to the people in the north.
Yeah, and of course we're seeing scenes, as you suggested, of looting, haven't we? Because people are hungry. Will the Israelis then say that that's actually Hamas carrying out that looting, as they have done in the past?
Yes, they do. That's what they say, and there is some truth in that, but there's no general truth in the blanket assertion that Hamas are stealing all of the aid. They've always taken some of it, and that's illegitimate. Of course they do, and they sell it on the open markets and so on at very inflated prices. That's just reality, I'm afraid. And it's pretty poor, pretty bad. But it doesn't justify, in most people's view, the idea that Israel says, well, we can't send any aid in because Hamas takes all of it. That's just not the case. And there is this, as I say, a standoff. The UN says, look, we do the best that can be done. We've been doing it for years. We know how to do it. And we can keep these people fed and medically attended to if you just let us. But the Israelis have lost all faith in UNRWA, going back to the Hamas attack on the 7th of October. And they say that, UNRWA is deeply political. UNRWA says that we know that was it 9 of our people were dismissed because of their links with Hamas, but there are 13,000 UNRWA people working in Gaza. There are 30,000 UNRWA people across the Middle East. And we've done something about the handful that you complained about. And when Israel says, well, we've got evidence of all of these people, they say, well, where's the evidence? And they haven't produced it. They never produced it.
Well, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been strongly critical of Sir Keir Starmer, accusing him of emboldening Hamas after he called for a halt to Israel's military offensive in Gaza. Government Minister Luke Pollard has responded to those claims.
Well, we condemn the killing of the diplomats in the States. It is right that all diplomats from every country are able to do their job. But this is a terrible example of the anti-Semitic hate that sadly we are seeing rise in the world, and we condemn it thoroughly. But we are also making the strong case that there needs to be an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, that we need to see aid at scale delivered to the people of Gaza, and we need to see work delivered towards an immediate ceasefire. Now that needs to happen in conjunction with Hamas releasing all the hostages and releasing those without any further delay, because the only way to achieve peace in the region is with a lasting two-state solution, and that starts with an immediate ceasefire. It starts with a hostage release. It starts with aid flowing into Gaza, and all of those things need to happen now.
Well, the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, has been asked about this issue. She was speaking in the last few moments.
questions. What's your response to Netanyahu's criticism of Starmer?
Well, I'm not surprised that he has criticised the Prime Minister. We just saw two Israeli workers at the Israeli embassy in the US killed. It's a very febrile time. And we've also seen who has been congratulating and thanking Keir Starmer. That's Hamas, that's a terrorist group that runs Gaza. Those are not the people who are on our side.
Let's go to Westminster and speak to our political correspondent, Rob Powell. The UK, of course, a strong ally of Israel. How is the government navigating this new situation?
So I think the government is navigating it in part by not reacting to the words directly that have come from Benjamin Netanyahu. It's a sort of similar strategy to what we've had from the UK in terms of navigating some of the quite colourful statements that come from Donald Trump. They're keen to just not react to every twist and turn, to react and respond to events, but not necessarily to provide a running commentary, as they put it. And I think what you got from Luke Pollard a little bit earlier, the government minister, was a definite attempt to sort of decouple the murders of the two Israeli diplomats in Washington with the criticism that the UK, along with France and Canada, had waged towards Israel's involvement in Gaza and the lack of aid getting into Gaza as well, to essentially say they are separate things. I think what we've seen over the last 24 hours or so is an attempt from Benjamin Netanyahu and others in the Israeli administration to try and more link the two up and sort of link criticism over what is going on with Gaza to support for Hamas and to creating a climate where violence like that seen in Washington, D.C. Could be more likely. What was interesting about that Kemi Badenoch clip, and it's hard, it was sort of quite a brief and non-specific question that she was asked, but she did seem to row in behind what Benjamin Netanyahu was saying, was essentially saying that she wasn't surprised that he had criticised Keir Starmer and repeated the line essentially that Benjamin Netanyahu put out, that you need to look at who was congratulating countries like the UK for its criticism over Israel's involvement in Gaza, and that was Hamas. So Kemi Badenoch certainly trying to strike a more pro-Netanyahu, pro-Israeli government tone than Labour. I think I wouldn't expect any direct response from Number 10, as I say. They're still just pointing back to their more broader statements.
Limited aid deliveries resumed this week into Gaza, but the United Nations has warned that it's too little, too late. Speaking this afternoon, the UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, said the amount of aid being allowed into Gaza by Israel is nowhere near enough. Well, let's speak to Rachel Cummings, Humanitarian Director for Save the Children in Gaza. Thanks for your time this evening. Yeah, the UN Secretary-General said a teaspoon of aid had gone in when actually what was needed is a flood. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. You know, since the 2nd of March, no supplies have entered Gaza, no food, no water equipment, no medicines, no tents, nothing. So although, of course, we welcome any aid that comes into Gaza, it's absolutely not enough. There is a desperate need across the whole of Gaza for humanitarian supplies.
Have you seen any of this latest aid where you are?
No, I understand that there are some bakeries that have now started to produce bread with the flour that's been entered by WFP. There is a lot of discussion in Deir al-Balah of people trying to access and wanting to understand how they can get the bread, how they can get the food, but it's obviously not enough for the whole, all people here, and all the population is in desperate need.
And what impact is this having particularly on children?
Yeah, Save the Children has been working in Gaza for decades, and since the beginning of the war, we've been running services, health, nutrition, child protection, education services, and providing clean water. And we're obviously deeply concerned about the impact that the blockade has had on the malnutrition for children, and also their cognitive development and their ability to be children. Because, of course, remember, not only has there been a siege of Gaza where no supplies have entered, but there's also been a significant increase since the 18th of March when the pause in the hostilities broke down, a massive increase in the hostilities and the conflict. And since the 15th of May, there's been a huge uptick in the bombardment. So children are being attacked. Bombs are dropping frequently They're having to be evacuated and displaced from their location. So it's a compounding factors that we're deeply concerned about impacting children.
There's been some controversy over the use of words like famine, starvation. Are those the right words to be using right now?
You know, the classification is very clear. The whole of Gaza is at risk of famine, and we have what is a very, very small window now to bring in the food, the nutrition commodities that children who are already malnourished so desperately need. There's been some medicines, some nutrition supplies have entered in the last few days, but of course, during the pause and ceasefire, there were 600 trucks a day entering Gaza to meet some of the needs of the whole population. With the 100 or so trucks that have entered in the last 24, 48 hours, it's obviously not enough to meet the whole needs here.
And of course, we're also hearing about mothers who are unable to breastfeed and a severe shortage of formula milk.
Yeah, again, deeply concerning. We support mothers for breastfeeding to provide support. They need support to be able to breastfeed. If for whatever reason they're unable to breastfeed, then additional support to use ready-to-use infant formula. But this is very challenging in this context. Clean water is a must to prevent children getting very sick from diarrhea, for example. If a child is malnourished and gets diarrhea or a chest infection because of the way they're living, then it can be absolutely catastrophic. It can be fatal very, very quickly.
And I know you won't want to get deep into the politics of the situation, but what did you make of the joint statement by Keir Starmer and leaders of Canada and France?
You know, what is very clear for Gaza is that we need to have a definitive ceasefire, and whatever that takes is what is required. The people of Gaza have been under this constant bombardment for the last 18 months. The situation is absolutely desperate. We need a definitive ceasefire. We need supplies to enter Gaza. And of course, as Save the Children and our partners, we need to be able to provide a degree of protection and security for our teams to access populations who are so desperately in need.
Okay, we must leave it there. Rachel Cummings from Save the Children, thank you very much.
Thank you.
9 children from the same family have been killed in an Israeli airstrike on their home in Gaza. Doctors at the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis in the south of the Strip say the children's father and another sibling were injured in the strike. The children's mother, who's also a doctor at Nasser hospital, was on duty at the time of the attack. The Israeli military says it's reviewing claims of harm to civilians. And a warning, this report from our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, contains distressing content.
In Gaza, emergency workers rushing to the site of another airstrike. Israeli bombs do not discriminate between young and old. When they get there, they start recovering the badly burned remains of children. Is there anybody alive? They shout into the dark. It is a horrific scene. One body after another emerges from the rubble. In all, there are 9 brothers and sisters from the same family. The eldest child was just 12. The images have been blurred because they are too graphic to show. Nearby, their father, Dr. Hamdi al-Najjar, is found alive but gravely wounded. He doesn't know yet that most of his family is gone. 9 of his 10 children killed. He'd just returned home after dropping his wife, Dr. Ala al-Najjar, a paediatrician, at work for her shift. Then the missile struck. The paramedics take him to the Nasser Medical Complex, where he once saved lives. He returns as a casualty of war. British doctors working alongside Palestinian medics operated on their only surviving child. He's called Adam.
The last patient on my list today was an 11-year-old boy who seemed much younger as we lifted him onto the operating table. His injuries were bad enough, but the background, I think, was worse. The father was a physician here at the NASA hospital. We've asked about him. He had no political and no military connections. He doesn't seem to be prominent on social media, and yet his poor wife is the only uninjured one.
At the hospital, the bodies of the dead children are gently taken from the ambulance, one by one.
Children there, aged 10, 6 months, 5 months, 1 year, 2 years old.
They're then laid on the floor of the morgue. This is a place of unimaginable grief. This video shared by the family shows Eve, Ruslan and Jubran playing before the war started. Now, along with their siblings, they are another statistic in a conflict that has claimed the lives of thousands of children. But despite the rising death toll, the Israeli military campaign is intensifying. For those trapped here, the horror of this war is endless. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, in a statement responding to the strike, the Israeli military has told Sky News yesterday an IDF aircraft struck a number of suspects who were identified operating from a structure adjacent to IDF troops in the area of Khan Yunis. The Khan Yunis area is a dangerous war zone. Before beginning operations there, the IDF evacuated civilians from this area for their own safety. The claim regarding harm to uninvolved civilians is under review.
Palestinians have been killed during the storming of a United Nations aid warehouse in Gaza. Crowds broke through the fences around the facility and broke in, pushing past each other to grab whatever they could. The UN's World Food Programme has appealed for an immediate scale-up of food aid, with Israel only allowing a limited amount of relief to be delivered following the end of an 11-week-long blockade on Gaza. And more aid has been seen this morning at the Kerem Shalom crossing from Israel following the easing of that blockade. Meanwhile, in the occupied West Bank, breaking news this morning, Israel said it will establish 22 new settlements there. They include new settlements and legalization of existing outposts which had been built without government authorization. The announcement comes as human rights groups accuse Israel of turning a blind eye at what it calls the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, has this report.
These images show Jewish activists trying to stop Israeli settlers from taking over the center of Ras Al Ain, a community in the West Bank.
You can see that the land was furrowed, I think you say in English, by the settlers.
What is unfolding here is not just a land dispute, it is the systematic displacement of Palestinians, according to human rights groups.
Up the hill, we can see the illegal outposts.
Rachel Abramovitz is a member of Looking the Occupation in the Eye. They try to deter settler attacks.
And what they do, they gradually invaded the community, they expand, they terrorize the people.
And there's a purpose to that.
There's a purpose to terrorize the people, to put them to flight.
Salam Ka'abneh's family has lived on the land in Ras Al Ain for more than 50 years. Now, with a surge in attacks, he fears they may be forced from their home.
They stole more than 2,000 sheep from us and we face daily assaults. At night, they attack and frighten our women and children.
I feel tension in my chest right now.
We wanted to understand more about the settlers' activities, so we went to the hilltop above Salam's hamlet, where they'd moved in.
So we've just been at the Palestinian community, which is just over here, and we've seen what's been going on. Up this road is the Israeli settlement. It's an outpost. It was established here about 15 months ago, and there's lots of, they look like kids running towards us now. Not sure what kind of greeting we're going to get. We're going to try and ask them what they've been doing and why they've been doing it. But it looks like they're not going to let us to go any further forwards.
We're not looking for provocations or problems.
But we didn't get far. The atmosphere hostile, The car was quickly surrounded.
Okay.
It became clear we were not welcome.
Yeah, you can probably turn here.
We left without answers, but with a deeper understanding of the fear under which these vulnerable Palestinian communities are living. The Israeli military, as the occupier, is responsible for the security of the Palestinians here. But more and more settlers act with impunity.
I would say it's daylight robbery of land supported by the Israeli authorities, and it amounts to ethnic cleansing of large parts of the West Bank.
Alex Rossi from Sky News, nice to meet you.
Hello, nice to meet
This is Ed.
International condemnation of settler violence is growing. The British government sanctions several prominent figures, including Daniela Weiss, who's known as the godmother of the settler movement. But despite the backlash, she's now pushing plans to establish new settlements, this time in Gaza.
There will not be a Palestinian state between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. Never, ever. We annex with facts on the ground. The goal is clear: to prevent any option of establishing any kind of state, entity, whatever you call it, in the heartland of Israel.
The Israeli government says the accusations of ethnic cleansing are baseless and have no foundation in reality. But human rights groups say what is happening here has gone far beyond creeping annexation, where the Palestinians hope to build a state is disappearing under Israeli settlements, and with it the prospect of a two-state solution to resolve this conflict. Alex Rossi, Sky News, in the occupied West Bank.
Well, let's get more on the efforts to get aid into Gaza now. And after 47 people were injured in gunfire when an aid centre in Gaza was overrun on Tuesday, this morning the news of a crash at a UN World Food Programme warehouse reached us too. Well, Sky's world presenter Yada Hakim has been looking at the challenge of getting aid to Palestinians.
The scenes in Rafah this week come as hunger stalks the Gaza Strip. Israel had placed the territory under a total blockade from March until May, 78 days in which no food, water, fuel or medicine entered the enclave. From analysing satellite imagery and video on the ground, the Sky News Data and Forensics Unit can show the extent of the situation. Since October the 7th, until the blockade started, there was an average of around 1,200 trucks going into Gaza every week. The pre-war average is nearly double that number. Over the 5 days since the blockade ended, trucks containing vital supplies of things like flour, baby formula, and medical supplies entered Gaza. But there were just 388 of them. Look how far below the line it is, and also way below the 500 per day the UN says are needed. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency told us most of these trucks were looted soon after. Just who is to blame is disputed. The IDF says it's Hamas, while the UN blame armed gangs operating in areas which are supposed to be under Israeli control. The UN's Sam Rose described a looter's valley in the south between Kerem Shalom and Khan Yunis, where they say trucks would frequently be attacked. A photo posted last week showed a Palestinian man in military gear carrying an AK-47 with UN cars visible in the background. It's more than 3 kilometers inside an IDF-declared combat zone. The picture came from the Facebook page of this man, Yasser Abu Shabab, who multiple aid officials have named as a gang ringleader, though he denies his men were involved in the looting. The new US-backed aid system has said its continued distribution on Wednesday, claiming delivery of 800,000 meals. This was the scene on Tuesday as people were unpacking the boxes. Aid groups, however, have said the new system puts the lives of 1 million Palestinians in the north at risk by forcing them to travel to the south to get to it. 3 of the 4 aid hubs are located in the far south, with 1 located in the central region. And not only that, but the distribution centers are all located inside areas that the Israeli military has previously declared as combat zones. The compound overrun on Tuesday is one of those. even Palestinians who set up camp as close as possible to the aid hub must make a 5-kilometer round trip through one of the combat zones to get to food. The incident on Tuesday resulted in at least 47 Palestinians injured when a crowd overwhelmed the aid hub. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said last week Israel had only authorized for Gaza what amounts to a teaspoon of aid. With the new system's loss of control and recent resignation of its director, questions will be raised on how vital supplies get to those in need long term.
Now we're going to pivot back to the story we had at hour for you. More than 800 lawyers have called on the UK government to use all available means to stop the fighting in Gaza, including introducing sanctions on Israel. I'm joined now by the civil rights lawyer Michael Mansfield, former judge on the Russell Tribunal on Palestine, and one of the signatories of this letter. Very good morning to you, Michael. Thanks so much for joining us. A quick snapshot of why you've signed this letter.
Well, I've been in practice for over 50 years, and therefore I was born during the Second World War, and it was events after the Second World War that matter, because communities and nations got together and decided that the way forward was to construct a system of law, a rule of law, by which we avoid, as far as is humanly possible, what happened during the Second World War, the Holocaust, the bombings, the Blitz, and all the rest of it. And I think most people are probably aware of what happened, but perhaps they forget what happened after the war, which was this construct. And the construct was meaning to say to people, nationally and internationally, you don't settle disputes any more than you do local ones by just beating up the neighbor. There are limits to what you can do. And that applies internationally as well. So that's called the rule of law. And what's happened over the last few years is that whole construct has really been disregarded, dismissed, and in a sense, it's been brought into almost decay, because America versus Russia nearly all the time refused to use that construct. And so I think a number of us, 800, decided that it was time to voice the, if you like, the need for restraint, and then the need for a different kind of approach which allows people to live. Non-combatants have been protected by that construct.
And in this letter, you'd like to see the UK government do more in order to rein in some of the tactics being used by the Israeli government. I guess the extent of what you'd like to see them do, and whether you accept that their hands are somewhat tied on this.
Well, I don't think it's a good question, but there's a bit of it obviously I don't agree with. I don't think anybody's hands are tied. It's a moral and a legal issue. I mean, what is happening at the moment is perfectly clear in one sense. You see it on the screens every day of the week. The fact is, at this very moment, aid is not getting through. Even last night, the Israeli army opened on fire on the latest arrangement for aid getting in. The people who are being targeted are not the combatants at all. They are citizens. They are ordinary people, mainly women and children, that can't be justified. And so this is why, our hands are not tied in this regard. If we want to do something about it, as we did in the past, South Africa is a very good example during apartheid. People decided, in order to bring pressure, and that is the obligation on you and me, internationally, legally speaking, we have an obligation to people on the other side of the world, or wherever they are, if they're being oppressed. And we have here an illegal power. The International Court of Justice last year and 2004 have ruled consistently that the occupation by Israel of this territory is unlawful, which means that those who support that, and you can support it by providing arms, by providing security equipment and so on, should not happen. So you have to stop that until there is a change and a resolution towards peace and towards a different kind of civilization.
Do you think you have seen a significant change in tactic from the UK government on the last 10 days, let's say, or is it still insignificant?
I think it's significant because well, actually any move towards a resolution of this without the use of force and weapons and so on is a necessary step. So I think it is important because everything you do is accumulative. And so, like sanctions, you're entitled to do this in order to say to the other person, sorry, until you stop doing what you are doing, which is unlawful, the occupation, then we're not going to have dealings with you. And it's in that way that pressure is brought. Outside Israel, what is interesting, I think, at the moment, is the number of Israelis, not only here in the United Kingdom, but in Israel, who are saying, stop, stop, stop. Not just the relatives of the hostages, who obviously should have been returned, months ago, and then shouldn't have been taken in the first place. However, that pressure is mounting inside. There are soldiers in the IDF, refusers, people who will not go into Gaza and fight what is effectively becoming fast an illegal war. So I think from that point of view, whatever step, and the British government saying, and they've been cajoled a bit by other governments saying the same thing, now's the time to start taking concrete steps. That isn't involving invading, it's involving withdrawing support, arms, weapons, and security devices, and so on, and in a sort of technological backup. That's got to be withdrawn until there's a change. And you isolate that power. And that's a well-known tactic. It's happened in the past, and it's worked.
Michael Mansfield, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Okay, thanks.
Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, we're going to talk to the Lib Dems next.
Gaza is in a fight for survival. A home to 2 million people is now a hellscape. Aid operations have stalled, with people forced to scavenge for food. Israel says its mission is to eliminate Hamas and rescue its hostages. But now, louder than ever before, some allies are saying enough is enough and asking whether this is still a war on Hamas or an existential threat to the Palestinians.
This is on a completely different scale now. It's mass casualties, it's utter carnage.
What more evidence do you need now? Will you act decisively to prevent genocide?
We will bring our people home and we will destroy Hamas. We will not relent until we achieve all these vital goals.
Gazans are crying out for help, so who will answer that call? British surgeons trying to save the most vulnerable in Gaza tell us they want the UK to airlift children to safety. We put their calls to the Foreign Secretary.
What will end this suffering is a ceasefire, but if there's more that we can do to support children, of course we will seek to do that.
As dozens more people die in airstrikes on Gaza City, we follow paramedics driving through the front lines of a death zone. Amid desperate scrambles for food, the former UN aid chief tells us war crimes are being committed.
This is unequivocal. Of course it is genocide, just as it is weaponizing aid.
Israel's military strategy is now under intense scrutiny. We ask if now is the time Benjamin Netanyahu stops the fighting. We report from the occupied West Bank, where there's controversial new plans for expansion and this ominous message from the so-called godmother of the settler movement.
Will not be a Palestinian state between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. Never, ever.
Abdel Rahman Hakam Jamal.
And here I speak to some of the 300 high-profile names speaking out against Israel's actions. The warning from a former UN aid chief that Gazans are suffering a genocide is a startling claim. Later on, we'll hear from the Irish government who back that accusation, and we'll ask one of Benjamin Netanyahu's former security advisors to defend his government. We start, though, with a report on the Gazan children facing death without intervention from the outside world. Speaking to Sky News, British surgeons have appealed to the UK government to help provide life-saving treatment. The children are among the most vulnerable victims of this conflict that's claimed thousands of lives. Let me take a moment to remind you of the loss of life in the Strip up to now. The Gaza Health Ministry says that over 54,000 Palestinians have been killed since the October 7th attacks in 2023. The ceasefire brought with it a brief respite to Gaza's population in January. But since fighting resumed in March, there's been an upsurge in casualties, almost 4,000 people killed in just over 2 months. Our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, has the story of the children of war.
I just have to show you this little guy. This is my favourite little guy.
It's tough viewing. Hatem's only 3, covered in burns from an Israeli airstrike on his home.
It's a massive burn for a little guy like this. He's so adorable.
Just because you can't see it, maybe I'll make this the cover picture. The child's face is red, he's got white cream all over his face, I guess, to cool it down, and the rest of his body is bandaged up, the whole of his body. And he's got a pillow under his neck to keep his head up.
3, covered in burns from an Israeli airstrike on his home.
It's a massive burn for a little guy like this. He's so adorable. His eyelids are burnt, his hands are burnt, even his feet are burnt.
The voice you're hearing is British surgeon Victoria Rose, who's trying to save his life and many others.
Well, every day there are more and more children that come into our operating theatre that have been blown up. So it's getting harder and harder to get him a slot in theatre to have the dressing changes he needs.
Hatem's family photo album shows him as a happy, healthy boy before the bombing. His father, who was a teacher and seen here with him, was killed alongside his pregnant mother. Hatem is the family's sole survivor. His life now hangs on a thread, his condition swinging perilously from hour to hour, with Dr. Rose monitoring every step.
Unfortunately, he hasn't been too well recently. He's developed some bleeding from his intestines.
His guardian now, and the man who's hardly left his hospital bedside, is his grandfather, who gave us permission to use the pictures of his grandson. He's working with a British charity who's trying to get permission to airlift Hatem and other children to safety and specialist care in Britain. In more than 20 months, the UK's only taken fewer than a handful of the injured from Gaza, just 2 children.
What did children do wrong to suffer such injuries, to be burned and bombed? We ask God to grant them healing.
Look away now if you're squeamish. This is 1-year-old Karam, and he's the other baby identified by the British charity as needing emergency help now. He's suffering from Hirschsprung disease, a birth defect, but easily corrected with the right skills and equipment. His family's fled the bombings multiple times, moving from tent to tent in conditions which make it impossible to keep infections at bay.
No matter how much I describe how much my son is suffering, I wouldn't be able to describe it enough. I swear I am constantly crying.
Gaza's children are suffering horribly right now, with local health officials saying more than 16,000 have been killed, and children making up the vast bulk of their patients, according to the British surgeons inside.
What do you say to a 7-year-old girl who's already had one limb amputated well above the knee and now has to have her other leg amputated above the knee as well? She's 7 years old. She'll be confined most likely to a wheelchair for the rest of her life.
A young girl picks her way through the fire after an Israeli airstrike on a school being used by dozens of families as a shelter. More than 30 bodies were recovered from this. The little girl lost her entire family, her parents and siblings, and is scarred both physically and emotionally after witnessing their deaths in the inferno. I saw a lot of fire, she says. A big, big fire, and I was scared of it. So many children suffering so much trauma. The Israeli military continually justifies these bombings, including this one, by saying the shelter was harboring Hamas fighters without providing any evidence. The The British charity Project Pure Hope insists there's no justification for attacks which continually see the youngest hurt and maimed. They've written to the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary to allow Britain to do its bit to help Gaza children.
Most of the people affected by this catastrophe that's unfolding in Gaza are children. And children are the most vulnerable. They have nothing to do with the politics. And we really just need to see them for what they are. They are children, just like my children, just like everybody's children in this country, and we have the ability to help them.
Those on the ground in Gaza say it's way past the point of taking urgent action.
Every time I come, I say it's really bad, but this is on a completely different scale now. It's mass casualties, it's utter carnage. We are incapable of getting through this volume. We don't have the personnel, we don't have the medical supplies, and we really don't have the facilities. We are the last standing hospital in the south of Gaza. We really are on our knees now. He does, he looks really good. He looks much...
The surgeon's skills and determination are what's keeping Hatem alive right now, but it'll take much more than that to save him and the thousands of other children suffering in Gaza. Alex Crawford, Sky News.
To even stand a chance of survival, victims like those you saw in Alex's report rely on the help of daring paramedics racing between bomb sites and hospitals. Ambulance crews have been sharing their stories with us. Let's bring in our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. And Ali, you've been speaking to some of these heroes, really, these extraordinary paramedics who have been risking their own lives to try and save the lives of others.
Well, we've heard many times before that the medical facilities in Gaza are on the brink of collapse, and the same goes for the ambulance service, an integral part of the wider medical service. And tonight we hear that Al Al-Awda hospital in northern Gaza is going to be forced to close because it's now falling within an evacuation zone. So they will evacuate the remaining patients tomorrow, but they cannot take out the medical equipment because the roads nearby are too damaged. It's the latest blow to Gaza's medical facilities. But as I say, at the heart of a lot of it are the paramedics working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to go to the scene of airstrikes. I should warn you that my report contains the immediate aftermath of many of those airstrikes. This was seconds after the Israeli military hit a marketplace in Gaza City today. People can be seen writhing on the floor in agony. A few try to sit up, but collapse again. There was nothing the medics could do for the victims when they arrived. Bodies were heaved onto stretchers, their mutilated arms and legs twisted. Body parts are picked from the debris and wrapped into a sheet. Just another day in Gaza. The Gaza paramedics are on the front line of this war every single day. The relentless Israeli bombardment puts their lives in danger as they rush to the scene of airstrikes to help retrieve the dead and wounded. Our team has filmed with the ambulance crews in Gaza City over a number of days this week. It is Tuesday afternoon, and an Israeli strike has hit a building in the city. The fire is burning, but everyone has managed to escape. 4 people have been wounded. No one was killed in this strike. These paramedics are based at Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. Even back at their base, they aren't safe and can't properly relax. The hospital has come under attack many times. Also, there simply aren't that many of them, certainly not enough. And now, to make it worse, fuel for the ambulances is running low because of the blockade. The war is nearing its 20th month. They've been on call for more than 600 days now. The endless rescue missions and high number of civilian casualties take their toll.
The scenes we witness, children, severed limbs, the wounded, what affects us the most is the children. Sometimes after responding to an incident, you begin to imagine the injured children as your own relatives. These images get mixed in your mind.
The roads often become blocked by the fighting, as every day new areas are designated Israeli military combat zones. The paramedics need to adapt their journeys. Getting it wrong could be a lethal mistake. Paramedics and rescue workers have been killed during the war. Ala al-Hadidi was hit in a drone strike. He was buried by his colleagues. Every one of them knows it could have been them.
Safety? No, there is no safety. Right now, there is no safety. When we respond to an airstrike, the drones are overhead. In the first round of airstrikes, it targeted my colleague in one of our vehicles.
It is around 1 a.m. on Wednesday morning. A 3-story building has been hit with 20 people inside. There is chaos as the team arrive on the scene. The body of a young girl in her pajamas is immediately handed to them. She's dead. Standing on the ruins of the apartment block, they pull another body covered in dust from under a massive slab of concrete. Another one dead, this time a young man. In a few hours, it'll be dawn, a new day. The paramedics will have to be ready to go again.
Well, Martin Griffiths was UN aid chief at the start of this war. Speaking to me for this special programme, he accused Israel of carrying out a genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, a claim denied by Israel. Here is Mr. Griffiths giving his justification.
I mean, we have failed. We have all failed Gazan people, and the Palestinians of the West Bank as well, as we've been hearing these last days. Of course we have failed them. We have failed them through no protection, through no action, through no retaliation, through no justice, all the points that I know you make frequently. It's not just Western governments, it's the peoples. And the peoples are angry because they have seen their views disregarded for this last year or more. And of course the humanitarian agencies equally so. And that's why Tom is, I think rightly, very, very stern about this. So we haven't done what we should have done and what the Court of Justice told us all we should do last year, in the summer of last year. So that's either double standards or delinquency, but what it really is, it's allowed us to get to this point of mayhem in Gaza, of starvation and death in Gaza, and of impunity in the West Bank.
So you do believe what we are now seeing as a result of inaction and not allowing aid to get into the territory, and for this bombardment and killing to continue, you do believe it's genocide?
I do. You know, I'm a lawyer, actually, although probably not something that many people know, nor even me. So I've been, messing around with the issue of declarations and adjustments and assessments. But I think now we've got to the point, this is unequivocal. Of course it is genocide, just as it is weaponizing aid.